Welcome to my video. Subscribe now. The morning of September 25, 1978, began like any other morning in San Diego, California. The sun rose slowly over the Pacific Ocean, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. People were waking up, brewing their coffee, and preparing for another ordinary day. Children were getting ready for school. Workers were heading to their jobs. Nobody knew that before the morning ended, the sky above their city would tell a story of tragedy that would haunt them forever. David Boswell was a young flight instructor that morning. He was 27 years old, with sandy blonde hair and kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled. David loved flying more than anything else in the world. Since he was a boy, he had dreamed of soaring through the clouds. Now, he made his living teaching others to do the same. On this particular morning, David was preparing to take a student pilot named Martin Casey on a training flight. They would be flying a small Cessna 172, a reliable little plane that was perfect for teaching. The aircraft had a simple registration number painted on its side, November 7711 Golf. In the world of aviation, pilots often called planes by their registration numbers, like giving them names. Martin was nervous but excited. This was an important training session for him. He had been practicing for weeks, and today he would work on instrument landings at Montgomery Field, a small airport northeast of downtown San Diego. David reassured him with a gentle smile. "Don't worry," David said, placing a hand on Martin's shoulder. "We'll take it slow. Flying is all about patience and awareness." Meanwhile, across the city, another group of people was preparing for flight. PSA Flight 182 was a Boeing 727, a much larger aircraft that would carry 135 passengers and 7 crew members that morning. The plane was scheduled to fly from Sacramento to San Diego, then continue on to Los Angeles. Captain James McFerrin was in command. He was 42 years old, an experienced pilot with over 17,000 hours of flight time. His first officer was Robert Fox, 38 years old, equally skilled and professional. Together, they had flown countless flights without incident. They were good men, careful men, who took their responsibilities seriously. Among the passengers boarding Flight 182 was a woman named Jennifer Marsh. She was 31 years old, returning home to San Diego after visiting her mother in Sacramento. Jennifer had long dark hair and wore a yellow dress that her mother had made for her. She carried a book in her bag, planning to read during the short flight. She had no way of knowing she would never finish that book. There was also Robert Chen, a businessman traveling with important documents in his briefcase. There was elderly couple Margaret and Harold Stevens, married for 48 years, holding hands as they found their seats. There were students, teachers, parents, and children. Each person had a story. Each person had people waiting for them on the ground. The Boeing 727 took off from Sacramento without any problems. The flight was smooth, the weather was beautiful, and the passengers relaxed into their seats. Some read magazines. Others looked out the windows at the stunning California landscape below. The flight attendants moved through the cabin with practiced ease, offering drinks and smiles. Captain McFerrin contacted San Diego Approach Control as they began their descent. The air traffic controller that morning was a man named Bill Henley. He was 45 years old, and he had been doing this job for 15 years. Bill was known for being calm under pressure, for having a clear voice and a sharp mind. "PSA 182, San Diego Approach Control," Bill said into his microphone. "Descend and maintain 3,000 feet. Roger, descending to 3,000, Captain McFerrin replied. At almost the same time, David Boswell and his student Martin were flying their small Cessna in the same general area. They were practicing approaches to Montgomery Field. David contacted the same air traffic controller. "San Diego Approach, Cessna November 7711 Golf," David said. "We're at 3,500 feet, heading to Montgomery Field." Bill Henley, the controller, saw both aircraft on his radar screen. They were near each other, but it looked like they would pass safely. Still, it was his job to make sure pilots knew about nearby traffic. "PSA 182, traffic at 12 o'clock, 1 mile northbound," Bill said, informing the Boeing of the small Cessna ahead of them. Captain McFerrin looked out the cockpit window. "We have traffic in sight," he reported. This meant they could see the small plane. According to the rules of aviation, once a pilot reports having traffic in sight, they become responsible for maintaining separation from that aircraft. Okay, PSA 182, Bill Henley said. Maintain visual separation from that traffic. Will do, Captain McFerrin replied. The small Cessna continued its training exercises. David pointed out landmarks to his student, teaching him how to navigate using visual references. Martin was concentrating hard, trying to absorb everything his instructor told him. Behind them, the Boeing 727 continued its approach. The big jet was flying faster than the small Cessna, slowly catching up. Inside the cockpit, Captain McFerrin and First Officer Fox were going through their approach checklist. They were busy with the many tasks required when bringing a large aircraft in for landing. Time passed. Minutes that seemed ordinary, unremarkable. The kind of minutes that fill our lives, that we never think about twice. And then something went wrong. The Boeing 727 was now very close to the small Cessna, much closer than it should have been. But from where Captain McFerrin was sitting, the small plane had disappeared from his view. It was now directly beneath his aircraft, hidden in the blind spot under the nose of the Boeing. Do you see that Cessna? Captain McFerrin asked his first officer. There was a pause. No, I don't see it, Robert Fox replied. On the ground, people were going about their morning. A woman named Patricia Williams was hanging laundry in her backyard. A man named Thomas Garcia was mowing his lawn. Children were playing in the streets of North Park, a neighborhood in San Diego. Some of these people happened to look up at the sky. They saw the large Boeing 727 approaching. They saw the small Cessna, looking tiny in comparison. And they watched as the distance between the two aircraft grew smaller and smaller. Patricia Williams stopped hanging her laundry. Her hand froze, holding a wet towel. She could see what was about to happen. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. What could she do? She was just a woman standing in her backyard. The planes were thousands of feet above her. Thomas Garcia turned off his lawn mower. He stood perfectly still, watching the sky. His heart began to pound. He wanted to scream, to warn someone, to do something. But who could hear him? How could his voice reach those planes in the sky? The children playing in the street stopped their game. They pointed upward. Even at their young age, they could sense something was wrong. The planes were too close. Much too close. At exactly 9:01 in the morning, the Boeing 727 struck the small Cessna from behind. The impact was catastrophic. The smaller plane was torn apart instantly. David Boswell and Martin Casey had no time to react, no time even to understand what was happening. The Boeing 727, now with severe damage to its right wing, began to spiral downward. Inside the cabin, passengers who had been reading and relaxing suddenly found themselves in a nightmare. The plane rolled to the right, steeper and steeper. People screamed. Objects flew through the cabin. Jennifer Marsh dropped her book. Harold Stevens held his wife Margaret tighter than he had ever held her before. Captain McFerrin and First Officer Fox fought desperately to control the aircraft. Their hands moved quickly over the controls, trying everything they knew, using all their years of experience. But the damage was too severe. The laws of physics could not be overcome. Tower, we're going down, Captain McFerrin said into his radio. His voice was surprisingly calm. Even in these final moments, he remained professional. This is PSA 182. Those would be his last words. The people on the ground watched in horror as the Boeing 727 fell from the sky. It descended in a steep spiral, trailing smoke and fire. Patricia Williams dropped her laundry basket. Thomas Garcia fell to his knees. Parents grabbed their children and held them close. The aircraft crashed into the residential neighborhood of North Park at 9:02 in the morning. The impact destroyed several houses and killed 7 people on the ground. In total, 144 people died that morning. Not a single person on either aircraft survived. The sound of the crash echoed across San Diego. Smoke rose high into the sky, visible for miles. Emergency services rushed to the scene, but there was nothing they could do except begin the sad work of recovery. In the days that followed, investigators arrived. They collected pieces of wreckage. They interviewed witnesses. They listened to the recordings from air traffic control. Slowly, they pieced together what had happened. The investigation revealed something troubling. Many people on the ground had seen the two aircraft approaching each other. They had watched it happen. Some had even felt a terrible sense of dread, knowing what was about to occur. But they had said nothing. They had done nothing. How could they? What could they have done? This question haunted many of those witnesses for years afterward. Patricia Williams would sometimes wake in the middle of the night, seeing those two planes in her mind. Thomas Garcia became an advocate for aviation safety, driven by the helplessness he had felt that morning. But the truth was simple and sad. They were ordinary people on the ground. They had no radios, no way to contact the pilots. By the time they realized the danger, it was already too late. The tragedy was not their fault. They were just witnesses to something terrible, forced to watch as events unfolded beyond their control. The crash of PSA Flight 182 led to important changes in aviation. Rules about separation between aircraft were strengthened. Technology improved. Cockpits received better equipment to warn pilots of nearby traffic. The disaster, like so many others, taught lessons that would help prevent future accidents. Years passed. The neighborhood of North Park rebuilt. A memorial was erected to honor those who died. On September 25th of each year, people gather there. They speak the names of the lost. They remember Jennifer Marsh in her yellow dress. They remember Captain James McFerrin and his crew. They remember David Boswell and his student Martin Casey. They remember all 144 souls. And they remember the silent witnesses, the ordinary people who looked up that morning and saw tragedy unfold in the beautiful San Diego sky. Those witnesses carry their memories still, a burden they never asked for but will always bear. The sky above San Diego is busy. With aircraft every day, pilots fly carefully, aware of the lessons learned from that September morning so long ago. And sometimes, people on the ground look up and watch those planes passing safely overhead. They watch, and they remember. They remember that we are all connected in ways we cannot always see. That tragedy can strike in an instant. That even when we feel helpless, our witness matters. That every life is precious and every loss is felt. The story of PSA Flight 182 is not just about an aviation accident. It is about the fragility of life, about the limits of human control, and about the courage it takes to face tragedy with honesty and grace. Those who watched it happen and said nothing carry no blame. They carry memory. And in remembering, they honor the dead and remind the living to cherish each ordinary morning, each unremarkable day, because we never know when the sky might fall.